بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
We hope and pray that everyone is doing well tonight, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes our gathering a gathering of blessing and of mercy, and that He descends, He allows His Sakina to descend upon us, and that He remembers us in a better gathering than ours, inshallah ta'ala. Tonight we will continue with our series that we're doing, Ibad al-Rahman. I apologize, I didn't have enough time to create the slides for this. I have my notes, and so inshallah ta'ala we'll be going off of that. This rarely happens, so most of the other classes and the slides are already done. I worked on them from before, but tonight I don't have them, so I apologize. Usually I like to have that visual so that people can follow along, inshallah ta'ala. And then it helps us also stay focused and within the realm of the discussion, because a lot of times the discussion can go off. So inshallah ta'ala we'll have them ready next week. This week we had one more slide left from last time, which was talking about ubudiyya, or being a proper abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Since the title of the course is Ibad al-Rahman, the servants or the slaves of the Most Merciful, the idea is, how can we be better slaves, number one, and then obviously because it says Ibad al-Rahman, we're today, inshallah ta'ala, after we finish this, we're going to be talking about Ar-Rahman, which is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a little bit information about that, okay? The last point that we wanted to make about being a proper slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best slave of Allah, right, that ever existed. And we know this, we talked about it a little bit before. For example, he has a hadith in which he says, لا تطروني كما أطرت النصارى عيسى بن مريم. Do not overly praise me like the Christians have praised Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus the son of Mary. إنما أنا عبد الله ورسوله فقولوا عبد الله ورسوله. Indeed, I am merely the slave of Allah and His messenger, so call me the slave of Allah and His messenger. Why was he saying this? Because he knew that people will go to extremes if they can to. And this happens almost in everything. There's ifrat and tafrit. Ifrat is going too much, and tafrit is abandoning it completely, where there's nothing. And unfortunately, we have people that will always go either to one extreme or to another, where they overtly praise the Prophet ﷺ, so much so that it becomes as if they're worshipping the Prophet, or that they make the Prophet ﷺ have characteristics that are only due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they completely disregard the Prophet and don't even care about him, and he's not even on their radar, and he's sidelined, and there's no love or care or following or adherence to his sunnah whatsoever. This is also wrong in Islam, and we know this, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ here clearly states, I am the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing more. There's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ had many Sahaba that had different jobs. So Bilal, what was his job? He's the mu'adhin. So his nickname is Mu'adhin Rasulullah ﷺ. He's the mu'adhin of the Messenger of Allah. Very good. We have Hassan ibn Thabit. What's his job? شاعر. أيوة. لا شاعر هو في الأساس. شاعر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. كتبة الوحي. There are at least 20 Sahaba who are كتبة. Right? Among them was Umar. Among them was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Among them was Uthman. Among them was Zayd ibn Thabit. Among them, many of these major Sahaba, all of these are Katabat al-Wahy, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Many of them, Radwanullahi alayhim jami'an, were Katabat al-Wahy. They were writers of the Wahy. There was a Sahabi, his name is Thabit ibn Qais, radiyallahu anhu. Thabit ibn Qais. What was his job? Does anybody know? This is just a quick. I don't expect a lot of people. Thabit ibn Qais, radiyallahu anhu, was Khatibun Nabi. He was the khatib, the orator of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ would use him whenever they were outdoors, whenever he had to convey a message to a large group of people, he would have him basically act as, and I'm using this, and this is not, I don't want you guys to take this as disrespect, and this is what is a human microphone. MashaAllah, Allah gave him a voice where he could reach, very loud, naturally very loud. So he would stand in front of the group. So the Prophet would be talking, his voice would reach a certain area, this man would be sitting there, and then he would speak, and his voice would reach a huge amount of people. And a lot of times, eventually, when they had bigger masajid or bigger areas, they would actually copy this. So it would be another guy standing 10 lines, 15 lines, and he would be echoing, and then 10, 15 lines more, they would be echoing, وهكذا. And this is how the way they would lecture in major masajid and whatnot. So like for example, at the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, when he got out of jail during the mihna, he was imprisoned for a very long time, and then he was put under house arrest, and then he was let out. When he was let out, the amount of people that would come to his lecture, it's narrated to us, in the main masjid in Baghdad, 40,000 people would come to his nightly halaqah. Right? 40,000 people. Now this is at a time when there's no microphones. So how does his voice reach 40,000 people that are attending his lecture? And they would use those human microphones. So he would be speaking, and then they would echo it, and then it would, and continue on and so forth. So the Prophet did this as well. But in his masjid it wasn't needed that much, because the masjid has, the walls, etc. So people could generally hear the voice. But whenever they were outdoors or on the battlefield, etc., he would use Thabit ibn Qais. Thabit ibn Qais has a long story, we'll go over it inshallah one of these times. In one incident, and this is why it's important, Thabit ibn Qais, when he would repeat what the Prophet ﷺ said in the beginning, right? So the Prophet says this statement, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ, he says, there was a sentence before this that he said about Allah and His Messenger, right? And then he says, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ, right? فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. This is in the verse. And he says, I'm sorry, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا وَمَن يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ, and then he continues and he says something else. So in this case he says, وَمَن يَعْصِهِمَا فَقَدْ, and then he continues. So it doesn't say وَمَن يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. He says, وَمَن يَعْصِهِمَا. He combines them. Does everyone understand the difference? So he says, he was summarizing what the Prophet said. This is number one. So the Prophet didn't say those exact words. He changed the exact wording. This is number one. So he says, and whoever disobeys, instead of saying whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, he said, and whoever disobeys them both, then he will be among the losers. Right? So instead of saying whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, he said, and whoever disobeys them both. And as soon as he says this, the Prophet hears it, and he says to Thabit, Wayhak, woe to you, Aj'altani lillahi nidda, have you made me an equal to Allah? This is wrong. Why? How did it change the meaning? When I say, and whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, and am I equaling them to each other?
Yes. No.
When I say Allah and His Messenger, no, I'm not. Even though I mention them in the same sentence, am I making them the same? No. Why? Because Allah sent His Messenger. So His Messenger has any status because Allah gave it to him and because He's the one who sent him. So He's delivering a message. But if I say whoever disobeys them both, I'm making it seem what? As if they're both in the same level. And the Prophet ﷺ got upset. He yelled at him, he said, woe to you, in front of everybody. Like he's not, so usually when we give advice, what should we do? Take them to the side, sit down, correct them. This one, because the mistake was there, and the Prophet ﷺ got angry because it affected him personally. So he says, woe to you, did you make me equivalent to Allah? He says, whenever I say Allah and His Messenger, you have to say Allah and His Messenger. You can't say them both. You can't just say it like this. Because that's not who I am, and that's not, the reality of the relationship is not that. So we can never put the Prophet ﷺ, even though it might seem, sometimes we think, okay, where does the Prophet ﷺ get what he says? Is he getting it from himself, or is he getting it because of revelation? Because it's revelation. Are there instances in which the Prophet ﷺ does his own ijtihad? Yes, these are very rare. Right? And even then, his ijtihad ﷺ is still tashri'ah to the ummah. Because of the status that Allah gave him. But at the end of the day, he's a messenger. Right? And also his personal ijtihadat that he does is very rare. And they're corrected if he ever makes a mistake. An example of this is in the Battle of Badr. What happened? Allah tells him, عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُ. Allah has forgiven you. Why did you do this? So Allah even gives him an excuse. He says, you're forgiven, but why did you do this? What did he do? He forgave some of the prisoners of the Battle of Badr, and he let some of them go, and he allowed some of them to pay a ransom, or to teach some people how to read and write, etc., etc. We know the story. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his tashri', his legislation at the time was, we will take no prisoners. Even the people that are taken prisoners, all of them to be killed. But this shows you, and that was actually the opinion of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and he mentions this in the hadith, but that the Prophet said, no, let's, you know what I mean, it's detailed, it's nuanced, and he did this, and Allah forgave him, and in fact it turns out that it was actually okay, because it shows you this nuanced opinion and whatnot, and you can go back to the books of Sirah to look at this. The point being, the status of the Prophet ﷺ is that he is subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is Allah's slave, he is the perfect slave. And this is why when we imitate, and when we copy, and when we follow, and when we put the Prophet as a qudwa, as a role model, in fact all we're doing is being ourselves proper slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We mentioned this before, we mentioned this last week, after Isha, which is where when Aisha radiallahu anha, she sees the Prophet praying at night, and she says, Ya Rasulullah, why are you putting yourself through this? You know, he was tiring himself, he was working hard, etc. Why are you doing this? وَقَدْ غَفْرَ اللَّهُ لَكَ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. This is a reference to the verse in Surah Al-Fatih, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to the Prophet sallallahu إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. You know, in order for, he says, indeed we have opened for you a great opening, a conquest. Even though it was just the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, but Allah mentioned it as a conquest. And then Allah tells the Prophet ﷺ, you're forgiven all of your past and all of your future sins. Right? This is an amazing thing. And so this is a question, is there anybody who is ever forgiven their past and future sins besides the Prophet ﷺ? No. Even for us human beings, when we ask for forgiveness and Allah forgives you, it's only for past, not for future. Nobody has a guarantee for future. Right? This is why we're always careful, even if it's for future. Now a person could argue, okay, what about anybody who's given glad tidings of paradise? Are they forgiven necessarily? Well, just because they're going to enter paradise doesn't mean that they're forgiven. Doesn't mean that they don't have sins. Does that make sense? And this is a good question. Was that the question they were going to ask? Okay. But they were given at least a ticket to Jannah. What's amazing is that the Mubashirin al-Jannah, and they're not just the 10. There are many other Sahaba who are also given glad tidings of Jannah. One of them, by the way, was Thabit ibn Qais, the Khatib, the one who, the order of the Prophet ﷺ. He was given a bashara of Jannah in an incident that we'll go over in Surah Al-Hujurat, inshallah. None of the people who were given glad tidings of Jannah ever said, you know what, since I have a guarantee to Jannah, khalas, I'm just going to lay back, I'm going to relax, I don't have to work too hard. Khalas, you know, the Prophet already said, I'm in Jannah, so why worry? Or why, in fact, it caused them to do what? It caused them to work even harder. And each and every one of them did this. And it looks, and when we look at it, when we look at it, the Prophet ﷺ said this hadith, by the way, when he said about the 10 that were given glad tidings of Jannah, the Prophet was on the minbar, it was on the day of Friday, and it was close to his death, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it becomes very well apparent that he's given an indication to the rest of the Sahaba that after me, look to these 10, you know what I mean, for guidance. Look to these 10 for role models. Look to these 10 for how to live a good life. And if we look each one of the 10, subhanAllah is himself, alam, he is a role model, he's great in every single way, and this is why I believe that every Muslim should study the biographies of at least these 10 Sahaba, if not obviously more than just these 10. So going back, the Prophet, he's praying, and Aisha tells him, why are you doing this to yourself when Allah has already forgiven you? Your past and your future sins. And what does he say? أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a thankful slave? She's mentioning that both this is me being a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is me being thankful for everything that Allah has given us. or has given me in this case. Obviously, we should try to exemplify this in our own lives. Did the Prophet ﷺ find salah as a burden? For him, what was salah? What did he say about it? It was a relief. Right? What did he tell Bilal? Aywa arihna biha ya Bilal. Right? Give us comfort in this, ya Bilal. You know what's amazing about this is that he's telling Bilal, give us comfort in this, ya Bilal. But is he praying when Bilal is making the adhan? So if he finds his comfort in salah, why is he telling Bilal, arihna biha?
No, what's the question again?
The question is, he finds comfort in salah, right? But he's telling Bilal, arihna biha. Obviously Bilal is not leading the prayer. What is Bilal doing?
Calling people.
Calling the adhan. So why is he finding comfort in the adhan as well?
So the other salah.
Jama'ah.
You're calling people to salah.
So you know, they've shown those studies where the anticipation of something gives you the same reward as the something itself. Right? So in the brain and in our bodies, once I know that something is about to happen, I actually, if I find that thing that's enjoyable, whatever leads up to it, I will also find it enjoyable as well. They've done studies to prove this in human beings and in animals. Like an example, those monkeys, they would ring a bell, ding, and then sugar water would come out, and they would drink it. And then ding, the bell would ring, and then sugar water would come out, and they would drink it. So they associated what? The ding, the bell, with the idea that, okay, sugar water is going to come. And they would measure their brain, and as soon as they would hear the ding, what would happen? They were like, oh yes, you know what I mean? They would actually, and eventually, the rush would be at its peak even before the sugar. Meaning the physical part of the sugar wear off, and the idea that I'm about to get a reward was actually better just because of the ding. The alert that, oh, we're about to pray. And this happens in us human beings. We know this. Like as soon as you come home and you smell like the food, you're excited, and actually you enjoy that part of waiting for the food, the anticipation of the food, more so than actually eating. And once you eat, obviously you're enjoying it, but the anticipation of the food is there while you're waiting. This is why people are willing to wait a little bit while the food is being cooked. It's not a problem. This is true. Restaurants actually know this. There's a lot of restaurants where they're not in a hurry, because they know that the food is good and they know that you're anticipating it, etc. And so they'll allow you to wait. Obviously, if you wait too long, your stomach will start to growl, and then the tip will go down, and then you don't like it. That's a different issue, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is basically telling Bilal, "Arihna biha ya Bilal," because the adhan is that alert that we're about to pray. And the Prophet ﷺ, because he found enjoyment in the salah, he also found enjoyment in the thing that alerted him that we're about to pray as well. It was not a burden, in fact he found enjoyment in it. This is an amazing thing, because when you think about it, it doesn't make sense that, okay, if I find my comfort in salah, why am I finding comfort in the adhan? Because Bilal is just calling the adhan, he's not doing anything else. But in fact it's because of this. The Prophet ﷺ is looking forward to the salah. How many people look forward to the salah? Right? I'm not asking, I don't want to raise up hands, but I'm saying us, do we approach the salah as if it's a burden, or if it's something that we look forward to? Obviously, the Prophet look forward to it, because he enjoyed it, he found comfort in it. That's why I said, "Arihna biha," give us comfort in it, ya Bilal. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, in the hadith, Aisha that narrates, she says, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا حزبه أمر فزع إلى الصلاة. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he was troubled by anything, what did he do? He went and rushed to salah, right? This is an amazing thing. When people can find their comfort in salah, this is what we want to do. This is the status that we want to get to. Many people, when they're worried about something, whatever, they might go to something else. There's people who find comfort in food. This is why there's a whole category of food that's called what? Comfort food. Stress food. What is that we're going to say? Stress eating? There's people that stress eat. When they're stressed, they just eat more. Or there's people that want comfort food. It's like, I've been having a bad day, I'm just going to go buy a dozen of donuts and go through them. You know what I mean? Are there people who do this? Yes, 100%. Or they go and buy chocolate, or they, whatever their vice is, they'll do it. They'll find comfort in food. They'll find comfort in binge watching a show, or watching their favorite movie, or whatever it is, right? Or playing a video game, forgetting themselves, etc. There's people who find their comfort in different things. The Prophet ﷺ found his comfort where? In Salah. And it's not just because of Salah itself, it's because of who he's connecting with. They said that the essence of all the things that we do in our life is connection. We just yearn for a connection. In fact, people who get addictions, I don't know if you guys know this, people who get addictions and people who don't get addictions, there are people, and there's studies that, and there's a guy who wrote a book, and I'm trying to remember the name of his book. He wrote a book about this topic. But it's an interesting theory, and it has some Islamic basis to it. So his theory goes as follows. And bear with me a little bit, inshallah ta'ala, but inshallah it should be beneficial. So he says that there are people who very easily get addicted to anything. Right? You give them cocaine one time and they're gone. And there's people who try cocaine and they never get addicted. There's people who, alcohol, one drink and they're addicted for the rest of their lives. And there are people who can drink time after time and they're never addicted. They'll get over it. And they never develop a physical dependency. And whatever you throw at them, there's, by the way, people who have food addictions. Right? There's internet addictions, among which there's pornography addictions. Then there's, entertainment addictions. There's all these other types of addictions that we know about. So they said that there's people who very easily get addicted, and then there's people who don't. And when comparing the two, you know what they found the difference between the two was? It wasn't something physical. It was that the people who were not getting addicted had good, healthy connections in their lives to other things. And the people who very easily got addicted lacked a sense of connection either to community or to friends or to family or to a higher purpose or a higher power or whatever. The people who did not get addicted had good, healthy connections with family, with friends, with their community, with their religion, etc. Healthy connections. And the people who got addicted, fell easily to the addictions, did not have healthy connections. And they said that in reality, the addiction is meant to fill in a gap that exists in the person's life in terms of the connections that they have with something else. Okay? And so when we have healthy connections with whatever it is, it'll actually protect us. And the Prophet ﷺ, obviously, when we talk about salah itself, asal linguistically means what? It means to connect. This is why if a person truly has a healthy relationship with their salah, which obviously means that they have a healthy relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will be almost immune to any of these outside addictions. If they have a healthy salah. This is why one of the first things that we ask when we deal with people that are going through whatever they're going through, how's your salah? Oh, my salah is okay. Tayyib. Do you do extra? Do you do more? Do you do this? Are you focused in your salah, etc.? And then you look at these types of things, and almost always you'll find that there's a deficiency in their salah, wherever it is. And once a person has a healthy relationship with their salah, it doesn't mean that now we have to be praying 24/7 and we're praying, we're spending hours and hours a day praying. No. But if you look at the Prophet ﷺ and his salah, it exemplified what the ideal is and where we should try to aim for. And then when you have those healthy connections, it'll actually make you immune to all of these pitfalls that people can fall into. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and to protect us in this, inshallah ta'ala. In another hadith he says, جُعْلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. What is قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي? The happiness of my eye. They say you're the apple of my eye, you're the comfort of my eye, but all of these things, 100%. This is where he found the most enjoyment, the most comfort that he found in salah. Is this something that we can attain?
Yes.
We should try to, right? Number one. Number two, the word ju'ilat. It's a verb. What does that mean?
It was made.
It was made. So did the Prophet make it? No. Who made it? Aywa, Allah made it. Allah is the fa'il. Which means that Allah is the one who helps you do this. You can't do it on your own. Which is interesting. So now you're asking Allah to help you better worship Him. Even though Allah requires you to worship Him, they're asking Allah to help you worship Him. Do we have this meaning somewhere in a verse? Yes, we do. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone we worship, you alone we seek for help. But aslan, another meaning, Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, aslan, the why are they both together? It's because you can only worship if Allah helps you. And Allah will help you more when you worship Him. So it's a cycle. Do you guys see how this works? The only way for you to worship Him is if He helped you. And the only way for Him to help you is if you worshipped Him. So you need to worship Him for Him to help you. But He needs to help you in order for Him to worship you, in order for you to worship Him, and it just keeps on going. So obviously the better that you initiate, the better you worship, the better Allah will help you in your life. But also for you to be a better worshiper, you need to ask Him to help you. And we need to constantly be doing this. And we need to acknowledge this. That also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who facilitates this for us, yes. Then also we need to take the initiative, and we need to go about it as well. طيب, outside of this, how was his worship in general? Wasn't he the most fearful of Allah, of all the people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes?
Yes.
Did he worship the most though? In terms of amount, sheer amount?
No.
No. Like, did he worship ever all night? We had never had recorded ever that he worshipped all night.
No.
Did he ever fast all year long? No. In fact, even in, so this is a question that comes up, and maybe we mentioned it back in Ramadan. I don't know if we mentioned it, but the question is as follows. The Prophet, when he was asked, what is the best prayer and what is the best fasting? And what did he say? The best prayer is the prayer of Dawood alayhi salam, and the best fasting is the fasting of Dawood alayhi salam. طيب, how did he pray? كان لا في الصلاة.
He slept some of the night and he get up.
أيوة. He says كان ينام نصف الليل ويقوم ثلثه وينام سدسه. He used to he used to sleep half the night. Which, if you think about it, this is how much we're sleeping anyways. Except we're not doing the other part. He used to sleep half the night. When does the night start? No, Maghrib time. Now, does that mean they were sleeping after Maghrib? No. Obviously sleeping after Isha. But the amount of sleep that he would do is half the night. So if we measure, let's say Isha. Isha is what time? 9 o'clock? How much is half the night now? Let's say the night is 12 hours. He's sleeping 6 hours. That's actually very healthy, if you think about it. Does that make sense? And when we say, when Islam says, oh, you have to do Qiyamul Layl, etc., a lot of us, we have in mind what? Man, when am I going to sleep? But also, when we think about it, the way that we live our lives now, it's not that very healthy. Now, of course, I'm guilty of this first and foremost. I'm not saying that I have the solution. A lot of times, because of how late we leave the masjid and how late, and after this we have to take care of things, and sometimes we haven't eaten dinner, and then I have to spend time with your family, all these other things. We're probably sleeping at midnight, 1 o'clock, and then you have to wake up at 4 o'clock to come to Fajr. How much are you sleeping at night now? Not that much. Does that make sense? This is because of the artificial way of our lives now. But if you look at how it was originally intended, you're sleeping half the night at 6 hours. And then he would pray for thulutha, a third of the night. How much is a third of the night? 3 to 4 hours. Right? Let's say 3 to 4 hours. That's a good amount of time. And then he says this is the best. So obviously, if you're just starting, and if somebody here doesn't have a regular regimen of Qiyamul Layl, I don't want you to start with 3 to 4 hours, because you're going to quit after a while. It's going to be impossible. You have to build it up. Start with 2 rak'ahs. Wallahi, one of the mashaykh gave me this advice, it worked. He says, don't aim high, aim peacefully, step by step. Start with just 2, before you even go to bed. Or wake up early before Fajr and do 2. And then after a while, do 2 more. And then after a while, eventually only pray 8. Because how much did the Prophet pray at night? 8 rak'at. And then eventually what you're increasing is the length of the rak'at, not the amount. But just get it up there and then, try to do it. And try to get surahs that you're regular with and that are recommended to pray on a nightly basis. And other things as well, and you can get a regimen, inshallah. Okay? But obviously the ideal is 3 to 4 hours. He's awake for 3 to 4 hours. وَيَنَامُ سُدُسَهَا, and then he sleeps for the last sixth of the night, right before Fajr. So he would take a quick nap before Fajr prayer. How much is the sixth of the night? It's a couple hours, an hour and a half. By the way, an hour and a half, 90 minutes is a full sleep cycle. Do you guys know about sleep cycles? Where it goes like shallow sleep, and then you go deep sleep, and then there's REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, and then you're out. And the average human being takes about 90 minutes. Which is why if you can take a nap, either take 20 minutes or 90 minutes, but never in between. And never more. If you ever want to take a nap, and this is proven science. I had this conversation with a sleep doctor, a Somali doctor. His specialty is sleep. This is what he recommended. And even in books, because I read this in a book and I clarified it with him, and he said, yeah, this is correct. This is exactly what you do. Okay? Because 20 minutes, you'll stay in shallow and you will never get to deep. Because if you get into deep sleep, when you wake up, what will happen? You'll be groggy. You'll be like, oh. Yeah, you'll be more tired than you started. You're like, I regret taking this nap because now I'm more tired than I was before. Doesn't this happen to us? Yes. So that's because why? You got into the deep sleep without letting your body naturally get out of it. So this is called sleep inertia, and it causes you a lot of prayani. It takes you, however deep you were, is however long it'll take you to get out of it. Right? And it's really bad. So if you sleep for 20 minutes, which is a power nap, and guess what? The Prophet ﷺ in his qaylula, how long was his qaylula?
15 minutes.
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes. It's the power nap, right? Which is why this is what's recommended. There's a book by an author, his name is Daniel Pink, and he was writing about the science behind these naps. And along his course, he's saying, these naps, by the way, he's like, there are people who found this from a long time ago in Spain, they do the siestas, etc. And then he says, in Islamic culture, the Prophet Muhammad, this is what he says in his book. And I was reading this book and I was like, wow, this guy he's using the sunnah to confirm the theory about why it's healthy to take a nap in the daytime, and how he's saying that the qaylula from the Islamic literature is roughly about 20 minutes in the middle of the day. And he's like, scientifically, this is the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself. It'll actually allow you to recharge, it'll allow you to regain strength, because in that middle day, there's like this dip in terms of productivity and all these things, and the way to overcome that dip is by taking a nap, or recharging very healthily.
What's his name?
Daniel Pink, and his book is called When. The name of the book is called When. It's a very good book, I read it, awesome book, because it talks about the science behind timing. So there's a good time to do things, there's a bad time to do things. So it says usually, for example, the best time to do things that you don't want to do is in the morning, because you're the freshest. Never put it off until nighttime, because at nighttime, your willpower is the weakest, your energy is at its lowest, and then you're not going to do it, and it's going to be done really badly. Anytime you have a detailed task that you do not like doing, do it in the morning. This is why the best time to do anything, to get things done, is right after Fajr. Scientifically proven. And we know this. The Prophet himself, he says, بُورِكَ لِأُمَّتِي فِي بُكُورِهَا. The barakah has been put for my ummah in its earliness. This is why the best time to get anything done is at that Fajr time. Utilize it. If you waste it doing something else, whatever it is, sleeping, etc., it's a wasted opportunity every day. So, it's a good book, read it, inshallah, it'll benefit. What's amazing is that he has this, and he goes on about like the sunnah and what's recommended for about a whole page. The sleep according to the sunnah. He's dedicated. Now he's a non-Muslim, he's recommending this to his non-Muslim friends. It's not from a Muslim audience, but he's using the sunnah to back up his point, because he's saying, ancient religious medicine, you know what I mean, etc. So it was interesting that he said this. So going back, sleep cycles, 20 minutes, this is enough. There is something else that you can do, which is called, does anybody here go to Starbucks?
Yeah.
There's something that's called a nappuccino. Has anybody had this before?
The old school.
Youngsters, try that. Youngsters.
No, it's a nappuccino. You know the nap?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a nappuccino. Actually, it has nothing to do with Starbucks. But what he's saying is, there's some sleep scientists that will tell you this is the best way for you to refresh your day, where you, right before you take your nap, your qaylula, the 20-minute nap, you drink a cup of coffee that has caffeine. Right before. Why? Because it takes your body 20 minutes to absorb the caffeine. Caffeine doesn't work immediately. In order for it to be digested and stuff like this, it takes 20 minutes. So guess what? If you you drink the coffee, it's warm, it'll soothe you. You drink that quickly, go to sleep. In 20 minutes, when you wake up, the caffeine will be in your system, so you'll be what? Double awake. You'll be awake because of the nap, and you'll be awake because of the coffee. And so they call this a nappuccino, which is where you take a nap, and right before the nap, you drink some coffee. And it works. I did this, I woke up, I was like, whoa, this is, you're alert, you're ready to go, sometimes it's too much. So
You're not gonna oversleep either.
Huh?
You're not gonna oversleep.
No, you're not going to oversleep. Yeah, you guarantee that you're going to wake up at the 20-minute mark. So there's a lot of people that recommend doing the nappuccino. And like I said, it's not a Starbucks drink. It can be just regular coffee, right? Or tea, anything that has caffeine, and then you can do that, inshallah ta'ala. Otherwise, 90 minutes, if you want to take a longer nap, make sure it's 90 minutes. Because 90 minutes will allow you to go through the full cycle. So you go through the REM sleep. REM sleep is rapid eye movement. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen somebody sleep and their eyes are twitching. Have you ever seen somebody sleep and their eyes start to twitch? Yeah. And you'll see them and they're blinking. They'll start blinking really hard. Everybody does this. During the night, we go through REM cycles, healthy sleep, about 3 to 4 times a night. If you're getting really good sleep 4 times a night, this is perfect. The rapid eye movement lasts for about 10 minutes. And you'll see them twitch, their eyes are twitching, but their body is completely limp. They have no feeling in their body whatsoever during those 10 minutes. And you have to get to the REM sleep in order for the sleep cycle to be done. Once you get through REM, your body, about 10 minutes later, you'll get into shallow sleep, and this is where people move during the night. So when you move, you can only move during shallow sleep. So once you can move, this is when you should wake up. So if a person wakes up because they moved and stuff, this is actually fine because you're already in shallow sleep, so it's not unhealthy to wake up. It's actually fine from a health standpoint. What you don't want to do is wake up somebody while they're in REM sleep. And that's when they get jolted and they're scared and they're like, man, I was just having a crazy dream. The eye movement is due to them dreaming. So the REM sleep is that portion when they get a dream. And people who are very tired will go into REM sleep quicker than usual. So usually it takes you about an hour to get there, sometimes even more. But there are people who will go into REM sleep as soon as they shut their eyes. And this is a sign that they're actually not getting enough sleep and that they're sleep deprived. And there are people that have done that. This happened to me one time. I was awake for like over 36 hours and then I blacked out in my friend's car. And I was having these micro sleeps, and then when I woke up, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know. I had been driving for 12 hours before this. I drank like 3 Red Bulls. It was very bad to try to stay awake to get him, and I was driving. And then after this, I told him, "Khalas, I'm done. You need to drive because I'm gonna." I was like, "Okay," and I fell asleep, and I knocked out because I knew that I blacked out because when I woke up, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how much time. So then I asked him, how much time, okay, when was the last time I talked to you? How long have I been asleep? He's like, maybe 10 minutes. I was like, man, I felt like I was in a different world. And then after that, for the whole night, I was going into micro sleeps. And my eyes was very bad. So I never recommend anybody doing that. Get your sleep. It doesn't matter what's going on, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions about sleep, by the way? Or anybody want to add anything? I know this is a side issue. But we were talking about this because of Dawood alayhi salam. What I'm saying is, Islam is not meant to make things difficult. In fact, it makes them easy. And a lot of times we are the ones who make them more difficult. We say, oh, I don't have enough sleep, or I don't get it. Usually there's some tweaks that we have to do within our own lifestyle. Like, what's the best fasting?
Dawood alayhi salam.
Dawood alayhi salam. Right? How much did he fast?
1 day fast.
1 day fast, 1 day he didn't fast. Question. Would the Prophet ﷺ ever recommend something yet not do it himself?
No.
No, he did recommend Dawood alayhi salam.
He did recommend it,
He didn't use the fast.
but did he fast the way that Dawood fasted?
No, he didn't.
Why not?
You didn't want to make it hard on us.
It would be a sunnah.
Constant.
I don't want it to be sunnah.
He didn't want it to be sunnah, okay, but why would he recommend that fast then?
That's a
So does that mean that Dawood is better than him?
the Sahaba asked him like to make a
He recommended us to make
fasting.
it, say, for people who are able to do it, you can do it.
It's available if you want to get more ajr.
Okay. But so, question, does that make Dawood better than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
No.
No.
Why not? If he says this is the best fast.
He was
It's
the
always
best
fasting is better.
creation.
That was legislated in Dawood's time.
Okay. No, but Dawood, so we know if he said Dawood, he didn't say Bani Israel, because he was a prophet to Bani Israel. So this is something that Dawood himself wanted to do. So, the Prophet ﷺ actually did fast, the fast of Dawood.
3 days in the beginning of the month, middle of the month, and end of the month, and Monday, Friday, full Thursday. So
Uh-huh.
count like 18 days of month.
Ayub, you got it. So the way that he fasted, so what's meant by the fast of Dawood is not what we automatically assume. So Dawood alayhi salam didn't necessarily fast every other day. What it means is that overall he spent half of his days fasting and half of his days not fasting. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that every other day literally you do this. I did this every other day like this, thinking that that's how it was supposed to be done for like a year and a half when I was in college. I was, wallahi, I can tell you, I was beat up when I tried to do this fast. Because I figured, look, I'm in college, you know, I have all this energy, this zeal, khalas. I read the hadith, I'm like, yallah, let's go for it, let's do it. And then one of the mashayikh, he clarified, because when I told him this, he's like, no, Yakhi, this is not what's meant by it. I was like, what? See, this shows you also that a lot of times you have to have somebody explain it to you before you go and do it yourself, because a lot of times you don't know what you're doing, right? Doesn't mean every other day. What it means is that overall, you spend half your time fasting, half your time not fasting. And that's actually what the Prophet did. How? So he would fast all of Ramadan, that's 1 month. He would fast most of Sha'ban, okay, and most of Muharram. There's a hadith of Aisha, she says that كان يصوم أكثر ما يصومه في شهر الله المحرم. You know, the most that he would fast outside of Ramadan is Shahr Allah al-Muharram. In another hadith, she would mention Sha'ban. Sha'ban, of course, because he's getting ready for Ramadan, but Muharram is because it has the day of Ashura, and the Prophet already mandated. In the beginning of Islam, Ashura was mandatory, and then it became optional. But then after this, he would fast the majority of. So there's 3 months out of the year. Right? Automatically. We can round it up and say there's 3 months out of the year. If he's spending half the year fasting, that means you have to find 3 more months. Where are they? He would fast 3 days out of every month. The 13th, 14th, and 15th. Al-Ayyam al-Biyud. So 3 days out of every month is how many days? That's 36 days. So that's another month. Now we're up to 4 months. He would fast Mondays and Thursdays on a regular basis. How many days is that?
Like 4 months.
During the whole year, if you count Mondays and Thursdays, that's it's about 90 days. Yeah, 100. It's 100 and
110.
yeah, that's a lot of.
104.
3 months.
That's about 3 months. So now we're up to 7. Obviously, he didn't fast all of Muharram or all of Sha'ban, so then we can consolidate it. But now, when we round it up, how much did he fast? 6 months out of the year. Does that make sense? So, going back to the question, would the Prophet ever recommend something but then never do it? No. Does that make sense? Why is he mentioning Dawood now? It's because Dawood did this. And he's obviously following in his footsteps, and he's adding on, he's showing how through the Sunnah you can actually do it as well. Obviously us, yani Allah musta'an. And we recommend so many things and we're probably guilty of not doing a lot of it, but we have, and we should try to renew our intentions, inshallah ta'ala, to try to do it, or at least add as much as we can from the sunnah, right? But that's the idea that I wanted to show. So, in his fasting, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was also a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever he would eat, whenever he would drink, whenever he would not eat, not drink, he's doing it because he is a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of his prayers, in terms of his fasting, in terms of his charity, right? All of these types of things, in terms of his hajj, all of his acts of worship, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a proper slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about his dhikr, his remembrance of Allah? No, كان يذكر الله على جميع أحواله. The Aisha anha, she says that the Prophet would remember Allah in all of his states. No matter what state he was in, he would be remembering of Allah. Which means even if he doesn't have wudu, can you do dhikr? Even if you're in a state of janaba, major impurity, can you do dhikr? Yes, and you should. And this is also a recommendation for the sisters. Even if they're on their monthly cycle, this doesn't mean that they don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, they should not they should not pray or fast. But outside of this, can they do other acts of worship? 100%. Regular adhkar, regular dua, etc. All of these are open to them and they should be doing them. And in fact, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he mentions that if the woman has a regular habit of reciting the Quran in order to learn and to review, like her review, she can even do that while she's on her cycle in order for her to not forget the Quran that she had before. Right? As long as she's not touching the mushaf or anything like this, or even if she has to handle it kaza very briefly, that's fine. He even allows that. Because it has to facilitate something good. Right? The purpose being is that we're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our instances, in all of our states. And remember, I mentioned this I think before. Why does the Prophet ﷺ say ghufranak upon exiting the restroom?
Because he couldn't make a dhikr while he was
Exactly. Is it because ghufranak means what? Your forgiveness, Ya Allah, right? It means Ya Allah, your forgiveness. Like, why is he asking forgiveness after using the restroom? Is using the restroom sinful? No. Did he commit any sins while he was in the restroom? No. So then why is he asking for forgiveness? Because for him, he considered it as a time where I couldn't remember Allah with my tongue. But is obviously the remembrance of Allah is still in his heart? Yeah, of course. It's not a problem. There was a young guy who came to me. He's like, Sheikh, I have a problem. I said, what? He says, why is it that I only get the urge to remember Allah to do a dhikr when I'm in the restroom? This is what he said. So the only time that I remember to do dhikr is when I'm in the restroom. Why? What do you guys think is the reason?
What's that?
And what else? It's a psychological one. Obviously we call it waswas, but what's the psychological reason? In Arabic we say al-mamnu' marghub. Right? That which is forbidden is wanted, is desired. So if I tell you, hey, you can eat all of this food except for these buns, the bread right here, these toasted buns, you can't eat them. Guess what everybody wants to eat now? The buns. And there's no reason, like I just say that. If I say that to my kids, guys, don't go here. Guess where they want to go? They want to go there. All the other places that I told them go here, nobody wants to go anymore. And because, Ayman is waving at me. He knows this. And so he was following the same thing. Because we told him, he learned this in Sunday school, we told him he can make dhikr all the time, except in the restroom, don't make dhikr. Guess what his brain automatically did? As soon as he goes to the restroom, I want to make dhikr now. So we should probably tell them, guys, don't make dhikr anywhere except in the bathroom. And we're like, what? In order for them to get confused a little bit or this. But unfortunately it speaks sometimes to the weakness of our human nature, is that automatically when something is forbidden, that's what we focus on. And we need to get beyond that point of showing people, no, make dhikr here, make dhikr here, make dhikr here. So this is why teaching them from the perspective of like that book that has Hisn al-Muslim. Hisn al-Muslim, Fortress of the Muslim, is actually good. Why? Because it tells them specifically where to make dhikr. And once you cover all those things, guess what? You'll be making dhikr everywhere anyways. Does that make sense? Hisn Muslim, everybody's familiar with it, right? The booklet. It has over, almost 200 adhkar, you know what I mean? Depending on the version. Some of them 212 or whatever, some of them 174, all these different numbers. But it tells you when you wake up, you know what I mean? When you go to bed, when you leave your house, when you enter your house, when you put on your clothes, when you take off your clothes, when you enter the restroom, when you get out of the restroom, when you start your work, when you leave your work, when you get in your car, when you leave your car, when you enter the masjid, when you leave the masjid. Right? When you eat, when you finish eating, and even if you forget. And then it has when you feel worried about something, when you feel, anxious about something, when you want something to happen, how to pray istikhara, how to, you guys know, it goes through all these things. So once you go through all of those things, guess what? You're going to be making dhikr anyways. When it rains, when you see the wind, when you see lightning, when you hear thunder, when you hear even a rooster crow, when you hear a donkey, obviously we don't have a lot of donkeys, but there's when you hear a dog bark, when you hear all these different types, so it goes through even those types of things. So the purpose is when a person gets used to doing that, obviously then they'll be making dhikr and we look, most of these adhkar, by the way, if you can't memorize them, most of these adhkar revolve around what? Whenever you start something, you say what? Bismillah. And whenever you finish something, you say what? And if you revolve around these, you'll be fine. Because you'll look like when you leave your house, when you say Bismillah, when you enter your house, Bismillah, right? But there's the essence of Bismillah. So even if you say Bismillah and that's all you say, that's enough. Right? That should be the case. Bismillah, by the way, is an incomplete sentence. Linguistically, even in Arabic, it's incomplete. How do we complete it? Even Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is incomplete. In English and in Arabic, Jumla naqisa. How do we complete it? Yeah. I know we don't think about it because we say it every day, right? When you say it every day, you don't think about it. But I'm saying right now, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is incomplete. It's deficient. يلزمها فعل. It needs a fi'l, it needs a verb. Even in English. So what's the verb? I begin, but I begin what? Whatever I'm doing. Whatever my intention is. This is why Bismillah has everything to do with your intention. This is why Bismillah cannot be said without an intention. And this is why Bismillah in essence is for you to remember your intention.
Bismillah, then whatever you want to do.
Bismillah, whatever you want to do. So if I'm reading Quran, in reality I'm saying Bismillah aqra. This is why, what's the first revelation? Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord. And so when I'm reading Quran and I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, what am I saying? In reality, the verb is whatever I'm doing. So in essence, I'm saying, not verbally, but I'm saying in terms of what I'm doing, I'm reading in the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. When I eat, I'm saying I'm eating in the name of Allah. When I do my wudu, I'm saying I'm making my wudu in the name of Allah. When I go to work, I'm saying I'm going to work in the name of Allah. When I'm, riding in my car, right? What's the dhikr? Bismillah. Right? But I say Bismillah in the beginning. So I'm saying I'm driving in the name of Allah. Do you guys understand this now? So the verb of whatever it is that you're doing completes the sentence. We have to be aware of this. And that's how the sentence actually becomes complete. And it's situational, so it depends on what it is that you're doing. This is why, like I said, all of the adhkar, whenever you're starting something, you're starting in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you go from there. Last thing. One last, this is a statement, I believe, of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I didn't have a reference here for it. And maybe somebody can look it up. So the statement is, ليس الإيمان بالتمني والتحلي ولكن هو ما وقر في القلب وصدقه العمل. Iman is not by التحلي والتمني. What's تحلي?
Wishful thinking.
No, that's tamanni. Tamanni is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Very good. What's tahalli? Wearing. You're dressing. You're putting on the guise of iman. So I can go somewhere. I might be the worst person ever, but I grow out a beard and I wear a thobe, right? And everybody thinks, oh, this guy's a sheikh. When in fact, I'm just putting on clothes and I grow out my beard. That's all I did. And sometimes this fools us, right? Sometimes this fools the best of us. This happened to Imam Abu Hanifa. Here's another story. Imam Abu Hanifa is giving his lecture after Fajr, and the sun came up, or it was after Fajr, and this guy comes in, and Imam Abu Hanifa, after a while, he's asking his students, he's like, do you guys give me permission to put my legs out? And they said, of course, you should. He said, okay, I'll do this. By the way, this happened to us when I was in Kuwait. One of our elder mashayikh, he did surgery in his legs, extreme surgery, and so he couldn't sit the way he was sitting. And he looked at all of us and says, "Antum mithl awladi." You guys are like my children. Tismahuli, bas amid rijlayya hek. Do you give me permission to put my legs out like this? And all of us, so we were with a group. Some people didn't understand Arabic, some people did. I was one of the translators for the sheikh. But this lecture, I wasn't translating. This lecture, I was sitting a regular person, alhamdulillah. But usually during this program, I was translating for a lot of different mashayikh. So the other translator, he realized that most of the people didn't fully understand what the sheikh was asking. All of them were like, yeah, of course. The translator said, Sheikh, mumkin ashrahihum. He said, Fadla. He says, can I explain to them what's going on? He said, go ahead. He said to us, he's like, look, you guys, a lot of you guys are American. And in American culture, if a person puts his legs out, you don't care. You know what I mean? There's no disrespect or anything like this. But in his culture, where he comes from, for you to extend your legs or to put your feet up in front of someone else, this is a huge amount of shame and it shouldn't be done and it's disrespectful. But the sheikh here is saying, you guys are like my sons, my children, and he's showing me respect and all these things. But it also shows his humbleness. He's the sheikh, he can do whatever he wants. You guys would still be sitting here. But it's showing the humbleness of the sheikh that he's asking permission from the students to do something that he deems that might be taken as a little bit disrespectful. But then he sees you as his sons. Do you guys understand this? And they're like, oh, sheikh, of course, wallahi, no, we didn't, no problem. And now they understood what was going on. So Imam Abu Hanifa did the same thing before. And this man comes in to Imam Abu Hanifa and he's dressed up. He says, when you see his clothes, you just, this guy is somebody important, right? And so Imam Abu Hanifa, he gathers his feet, his legs, because he wants to show respect for this person. The person sits there for a while, and then he's listening to the lecture, and he's intrigued. And then he asks Abu Hanifa a question. And Miskeen, the question completely shows this person's level of knowledge. Where it was about an impossibility of if the sun doesn't rise on that day, then I still pray, duha, etc. And Abu Hanifa looks at him and he realizes that this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about and it's not as important as I thought he was. And before he answered his question, he says, Ana li Abu Hanifa an yamud rijlayhi. It's time for Abu Hanifa to put his legs back out. And he puts his legs back out and then he continues with the guy. So what I'm saying is don't be fooled by external looks. What really matters is what? So the continuation of the quote is, Iman, true Iman, is not by how you look. Like the clothes, obviously these are a part of it because a person has to be doing it for the proper intention, following the sunnah, etc. We're saying this obviously. But it's not just in looks and it's not in wishful thinking. Tamanni is wishful thinking. Are there a lot of people who have wishful thinking? Yes. Oh yeah, as long as I'm okay, I'm better than these other people, but he's not really doing much. There's wishful thinking. Iman is not through this. Iman is huwa ma waqara bil qalb wa saddaqahu al amal. It's what resides in the heart and then is backed up with actions. ما وقر في القلب وصدقه العمل. It's what's in your heart and then is backed up with actions. If a person says, I love Allah, I love Islam. Okay, very good. Do you pray 5 times a day? No, not really. What do we say about your claim of love, your claim of obedience? Is it true? There's no backup of actions. Okay? Do you do the 5 pillars of Islam? No, not really. Okay, how can you claim that? Oh, but Allah knows that I love Him. Allah knows that I believe in Him. Right? I've heard this before. I've had conversations with people where they didn't pray, and I asked them, why don't you pray? He's like, well, Allah knows that I love Him. Allah knows that I believe in Him. Okay, so prove it. You're saying Allah knows, that's great. Allah knows everything that's in our hearts. But your actions speak louder than your words. And in fact, your actions without, a claim without actions is just a claim. It's an empty claim. This is why throughout the Quran, Allah always says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. It's never الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا by itself. It's always وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ because your deeds are just as important as the iman that's in your heart. In fact, iman is what's in the heart, what's in the actions, what's on the tongue. It's all three. We can't separate them. This is how iman goes up and down. Iman goes up when you do good deeds, it goes down when you do bad deeds. Right? We know this. There are some groups that try to separate iman and they say iman is separate than your actions. And no, we don't believe this. We're not going to get too technical, but this is our belief. Iman is both statements and actions, and it's what's in the heart. It's all of these things. You can't separate them from one another. They have to go hand in hand. So, if a person says, going back to that person, the person says, Allah knows that I'm truthful, what would we tell him? What's something that we can tell him?
What?
I've met people who say, oh, God knows that I'm good, or God knows that I love Him or I believe in Him, so I don't need to pray. Yeah?
We can give the example of Prophet Muhammad.
Very good. Expand on it.
Yeah, like the Prophet Muhammad is way closer than this person to Allah, but he still prayed. So are you claiming that you're better than Prophet Muhammad? That he was
Very good. Excellent. Are you claiming that you're better than the Prophet? Because the Prophet prayed, they have a reply. There's some of them, so some of them don't have this reply, they don't know what they're just making this claim. But I have met some people, I've talked to them, where they make the claim that, I've reached the level of yaqeen. Okay? He says, Allah says, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Worship your Lord until the yaqeen comes to you. Worship your Lord. This is a commandment to the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran. Worship your Lord until yaqeen comes to you. وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Very good. So what's yaqeen here? Worship your Lord until yaqeen comes to you. He's telling Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what is this? Now? Death. Al-Maut. Because guess what? It's the only yaqeen that we have in our life. Nobody has any yaqeen except for death. Nobody has any certainty in their life except for death. Nothing else is certain. Sah? Does anybody have a guarantee, for example, from the moment they're born, that they will live to a certain age? La. That they will get married? La. That they will have children? La. That they will graduate college? La. We don't have those guarantees. Now those happen, alhamdulillah, but they might not happen to everybody. Or that you'll make this amount of money, or that you'll open up a business, or that you'll buy this car, or whatever. None of that is yaqeen at all. Nobody has that yaqeen. The only yaqeen that you know from the moment that you're born, the only thing that you're certain that will happen to you no matter what is what? Death. This is why death is called certainty, because we know that it's coming. Even non-Muslims know that death is coming. They know that it's yaqeen, we know that it's yaqeen. It's the agreed upon yaqeen. Right? It's funny because even you ask a non-Muslim, he says, yeah, yaqeen is death. A non-Muslim will tell you, yeah, certainty is death. But then you have a group of Muslims who are like, no, yaqeen is a higher level of iman that you get to. And once you get there, khalas, you no longer have to worship. Because it says, and worship until yaqeen comes to you. So once yaqeen comes to you, you no longer have to worship. So I was telling this person, like, yeah, I'm at the level of yaqeen. Wow. So what's it like? You know, certainty, all these things, you know. A'udhu billah. Well, they're like fooling themselves completely, shaitan, completely. I know it's like we're okay. And, you know, on a certain level, I felt that this person knew that they were fooling themselves. They heard this interpretation somewhere, and they're just kind of following their desires.
Also, not knowing the proper Arabic language.
Of course, not knowing how this ayah was interpreted throughout history, because they just came up with their own tafsir that nobody has ever come up with before. This is a problem, right? And then, at least though, this is a better level than there's another, and I can't remember what it's called, but there's a group of people who even claim a higher level than yaqeen. I'm trying to remember what they call it. Well, no, the tariqah is something else. That's like their way of learning. No, there's a higher level where he says, A'udhu billah, and I heard this guy. Now, this was not in person, this is on a video. But this is a big guy, major guy in a Muslim country, and you look at him, beard, imama, jubba, everything, and he's saying, I'm at a level where, for me, Allah no longer, like he's reached yaqeen, where he no longer has to worship, but then he's at a higher level where what are considered sins for regular people, for me, are acts of worship. And the consequences of this is what? The guy in his office. Now you walk into his office, he has, mashallah, Islamic books, kaza, 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 and then he was busting out a bottle of wine, and he's drinking.
That's ibadah for him.
And he's saying, this is for me, this is ibadah. And then people were saying he would be brought women, and he would be doing fawahish, and he would be brought other things. And for him, he's like, for me, this is an act of worship. For you guys, it's sins, yes, because you're not there yet. Once you're there, then we'll connect you, we'll hook you up. And for a fee, we can get you, quickly there. Obviously, there's a business for them. Because they belong to certain groups and cliques, how does a person know that he's at yaqeen? Unless the guy tells him. So the guy would come down and say, by the way, you've reached the level. But that's after he has a relationship with him, he's been giving him money, he's been giving him whatever. So at the end of the day, it's a business.
Which country?
You want to get me in trouble? I'm not saying which country. Then all those brothers are going to be like, Sheikh, why are you talking about our country? It's an Arab country. If you're curious, I'll tell you it's an Arab country. Huh? Oh, I know it's otherwise, but I'm saying this specific thing that I was, we were watching and stuff like this, and it's authenticated. I asked other people, and they said, yeah, this is true. There's a group of them that do this.
You just gotta find it yourself.
It's in Arabic. Anyways, any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
Yeah, regarding the reading the Mus'haf
Yes.
while not in wudu, or
Now,
what if someone reads the Mus'haf from an iPad or iPhone?
So the question is does the phone or the iPad have the same ruling as the Mus'haf? What do you guys think? Because if it did, would this be problematic? If your phone, right now, everybody here, I'm assuming, has an app that has the Quran on it, right? And your phone. طيب, if we treated it the same way as we treat the Mus'haf, is this a problem for us?
Yes.
Huge problem. Yeah, you can't go into the restroom with it in your pocket. You know what I mean? You can't do this. You can only handle your phone when you have wudu. All these other things. So, لا. يعني قال العلماء ليس للموبايل حكم المصحف. This is one. However, if you open up the app, now it's on the screen, does this mean you can be disregarding it or disrespectful with it? That you still have to treat that as if now, you know what I mean, it has that same sanctity, although aslan, there's a question before this, do you have to have wudu when touching the mushaf? It's better to have it, but is it required? As a hard requirement, I follow the opinion that no, it's not a hard requirement. It's better, yes, 100%. But especially for the purposes of learning and reviewing the Quran, etc. And aslan from the adillah that are used, the adillah seem to indicate other things. The adillah for, without a doubt, indicate that the tahara that's meant is a tahara al-kubra min al-janaba. So it's tahara from the major impurity. So if you're a junub, obviously you can't handle the mushaf, etc. You have to take a shower, etc. If you're in a major state of impurity, right? But if you're in a minor state of impurity, it's okay to handle the mushaf. Obviously it would be better to have wudu, but even if you don't have wudu, inshallah ta'ala, there's no problem. There's no sin, there's no blame. Right? So this is because, the two adillah, the two proofs that they use is the verse in Surah Al-Waqi'ah where it says, لَا يَمَسُّهُ إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ. No one touches it except the mutahharun, the purified. And they use this as proof that nobody can touch it except unless they're pure. But this actually verse is referring to the angels, not to human beings. And al-mutahharun huna hum al-malaika. Al-mutahharun here in this verse are also clearly angels. Every mufassir have said that these are the angels. So and plus it's not an amr, it's not a commandment, etc. So this is a proof, and it's disregarded. Then the second proof is that when the Prophet sent some of the Sahaba to Yemen, and he told them, لا يمس المصحف إلا طاهر. Let no one touch the mushaf except a tahir, a pure one. Obviously this could mean a tahara al-kubra, it doesn't have to mean a tahara al-sughra. Doesn't say mutawaddi, doesn't say that they have to have wudu, right? This is why we understand. Now, on the opposite side, they do say that, okay, this is proof that when it says tahir, obviously we should try to have wudu regardless, and I agree on this. If you have the ability to go make wudu before you handle the mushaf, aslan, it's better, right? But if you do not, and it's difficult for you to do so, there's no problem, inshallah ta'ala. Why? Because the opposite, aslan, the proof, there's a lot of proofs where they didn't have wudu and they were handling it, number one. Number two, if it prevents the person from reciting Quran, no, we want people to recite Quran. And this actually becomes one of the entrances of shaitan. Okay? Where shaitan will tell the person, oh, it's hard for you to make wudu because khalas, don't read Quran now. And then they'll end up doing something else when they could have actually been reading Quran. Because they weren't able to make wudu. Especially for the purposes of learning, like in a school setting and stuff, it's very hard for people to actually make wudu every time, etc. So for them, they don't have to. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he has in his book, Majmu' al-Fatawa, he talks about this, and he says that no, it's not a requirement. But it's a recommendation. You know what I mean? If you can, yeah. Now, do you have to have wudu to read Quran from memory? No. There's no requirement whatsoever. Okay? None of the madhahib, all four are unanimous that you do not have to have wudu to read Quran from memory. The only requirement is when you touch the mushaf and you're reading from the mushaf. But they say even if, let's say, I'm not touching the mushaf, but I'm reading from it, is that allowed? All four also allow that, if you're not touching it. So now it seems like, okay, touching it and the wudu and stuff like this is I think it's tashaddud, laysa fi mahal. As long as the person is not in janaba, they're fine.
What if you're reading for ruqya?
Now, if you're reading for ruqya, obviously for ruqya, aslan the ruqa, the people who do ruqya, will tell you that aslan, you shouldn't probably be doing ruqya without wudu, just because there's an inherent danger present, depending on what the ruqya is. But being in wudu is an extra layer of protection. I would never recommend doing ruqya without, especially if it's for a sick person or a person going through something. If it's just a regular, like systematic ruqya that you're doing for your children, etc., that one you don't have to have wudu for. But let's say there's somebody who has like jinn or sihr or something like this, and you don't have ruqya on him, you're crazy if you go in there without wudu. Okay? So, any other questions, inshallah? Okay, we'll stop here. Inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah wa hamdik. Ashhadu an la astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I wanted to let everybody know I'm going to be gone over the weekend. So tomorrow the khutbah is going to be given by Sheikh Sareem from Murfreesboro. I'm going to be gone. I have to go to Dallas for my studies, and then I'll be back, inshallah ta'ala, Sunday evening, Monday morning. So I'm leaving tomorrow morning, inshallah ta'ala.
So Tuesday and Wednesday would be what?
So Tuesday we'll have class, and Monday we'll have class as well. Monday is for the youth, Tuesdays tafsir, Wednesday we have our da'wah discussion, and then Thursday we have Ibadah Rahman.
What time is the Monday class?
They're all after Maghrib. All of these are after Maghrib. Barakallahu